Well, because the fact that you can name that, you could observe that in yourself. This, I say, awareness or naming it is 50% of any solution. Okay, and it's when we lack the consciousness and we simply repeat the patterns that were generated in us. Okay, and we don't have that observer part of ourselves, that we then are more likely to just replay what happened. None of us is perfect. There's a psychologist from England called Winnicott who said, "Good enough." Okay, good enough parenting. We don't have to be perfect. I love the idea of let's try something new. I love the way in which it becomes a creative process. It isn't, and we just look at these needs like guidance. Okay, it's always going to be, when is structure the right thing, and when is freedom the right thing. And you can learn it by actually observing the child, because they're telling you what they need. So allowing them to go through that tantrum and seeing it resolve on its own tells you they don't need your intervention. They need to be allowed that freedom. In another case, it might be that creating a structure that says, no, you don't get to function in a way that dominates the experience for everyone else. I mean, being a teacher, I was a teacher, so it's often figuring out what is the balance between these elements. And you could say 25 people in a room with one adult every day is kind of an artificial context, that we're trying to have people conform to an expectation that's not actually in their best interest, right? So, I mean, you keep that in mind as well. But awareness is the degree to which we grow individually, so that we're in the process of being able to keep looking at the problems that occur in life and see it through the lens of our own discovery, And we're not going to get to the point where, ta-da, I'm ready now. It's more like we're going to say, I think I'm ready to take on a challenging process. And raising a child is no doubt about it. It's a challenge, So.
Yeah, but not as. But like you say, having a child is being close to, this childhood things, and playful and joyful. Because when you're a child, you don't think about incomes, money, and what people think and everything. You just be. And what helped me, for example, is I remember when I was a child, I would love to go to theater. I would love to have this comedy class, and my parents didn't want, because we were afraid, oh, you want to be an actress, and actress will go naked on the screen and everything. So don't do that. Never do that, So I remember that they suppressed it, and it was kept in my unconscious or stuff, but I didn't allow myself anymore to think about it. And then now I grew up. And actually, it's funny enough, because I remember this when my dad died. So it was like maybe, during his time living, I didn't allow myself to think about, going back to acting classes and everything, just for fun, just not for having a job. But when he passed away, then I started to think about, oh, maybe my dad is not here, so I need to take care of my inner child. So what did I like when I was a child? Oh, I remember this, and it was 20 years ago. And then I did again this acting class, and it felt so good with myself, because you just have a good relationship with your inner child, because you are allowing this inner child to do what she wanted to do.
That word want, see, like you say, a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, they know what they want. Well, what they want is they want what they want, and they want it now, And that part of us is very important. And part of being in our inner child is realizing the importance of that. But also, what we learn with maturity is to say, okay, sometimes we don't respond to that level of desire, because there's something else we want, which is to be well. to feel good about our life, what's good for us. So we compromise, or we limit, we prioritize what it means to have a sustainable sense of our well-being, sometimes by giving up that initial what I want when I want it. You know? So that's growing up, that's maturity. Okay, and to take it a step further is when we also align what we want, our well-being, in terms of how it fits into humanity itself. So it doesn't mean we deny any of those early wants or desires. I mean, it may mean that we restrict it, but it's always putting it in the context of what's my well-being, and how does my well-being fit into what's good for humanity. So going back to our inner child sometimes means going back to that I want what I want when I want it. Because maybe we were so schooled and so focused on what somebody else wanted, like your father, that we denied some of what that is. So for me, it's very important to say, let's bring that out. Let's create the space for that playfulness, you know. So.
I want to add something, but I forgot what it is. It's about like people grow old. People stop playing because they're old. They grow old because they stop playing.
Wow. Yeah, there's some great quotes by people like Picasso, or where you know, they really identify the importance of having play as a way of being, you know, and I think that question is a good one. When we lose what that is, then maybe the vitality of life, or the optimism, the joy of living diminishes. And when we say, oh, you know, to be playful, even as an older person, is where the freedom is where the...
That's so true. All right, everyone. As much as I wanted for this conversation to, you know, flow, I love it so much, but we are almost at the end of our time together. So it would be amazing, perhaps we can share like an insight, a thought, like a takeaway before we end this conversation. And it's not about how big it is, but what feels true to ourselves right now at this moment about what we just had. Anyone who want to? I need some time to reflect.
Yeah, let's take a moment.
I think my takeaway is this conversation has reassured me to do things differently, because when I do things differently, going to Vietnam or trying the online school, I always have this question of what people will think and what will be the outcome. I'm not sure and everything, and I'm like, oh, maybe it's not right. I always question myself, and talking about this reassured me that yeah, it's okay. Just what you said, you know, like at least you try it differently, because we see the result of this actual world. If we don't try to do something differently, it will be the same results all the time, and on and on. So I'm okay, and I'm good, and I'm okay with my decision now. So thank you.
Yes.
I want to say thank you, Marie, for being here and expressing everything who you are, because as a mom, I know how hard it is, like to have a child and to raise them alone, all this stuff, because I was raised with a single mom. So you're doing a good job. It takes courage to do that. And what my takeaway from this conversation, everything, is that this conversation is something that we should put out there, because for me, who I am right now, I'm a nurse. Before I had like psychology and all this stuff, but I don't have the credentials as you are. You're studying right now. It's all based on experience, all based on play, because I let my inner child go out but sometimes it's too much freedom, too many options. But I had the wisdom from that experience, and people could learn a lot with this kind of conversation. And come to think of it, if someone could raise a child with a different way, instead of how the society tell us to be, that's what you're currently doing right now. But it's pretty challenging to peel those, layers of yourself to go that way, in a different way. But having this conversation make them feel at ease, being okay of doing different stuff, being like following what feels good to their kid, not just for themselves but for their kids. Not lash out because that's how they were brought, but let the kid just be and accept them for who they are, not because they want them to mold who they want them to be. So that's my takeaway. Like, this conversation is so beautiful, and I'm happy to be here.
That's all.
I also want to say a huge thanks to everybody. To be honest, there is a lot to reflect on, which I will do after this conversation in the following days. And we've touched upon many topics. I guess, one important takeaway for me, a reminder, let's say, what you mentioned about accepting the limitations of previous generations, not in a way of pointing fingers, but rather than, so this is the way it is, this is my reality now. I have the agency, I have the responsibility to shape my life the way, maybe not completely the way I want to, but there is a certain degree of what we can influence. Because I feel like with therapy, with self-discovery, and I am still going through that process, it sort of directs this way of thinking that, so that's why I'm like this, that's why it hurts. So there is a lot of, I feel like at initial steps, some part of blaming is inevitable just because everything is new and like you didn't know you had this limitation and now suddenly you discover that you do, and it just feels unfair. And of course it was even more unfair to the parent probably, like they probably had it much harder. But this unfairness can, tilt the perception of the situation. So it's a very good reminder to bring yourself back to the present. And so this is the landscape that I have, where can I go from here? So thank you for that. And thank you, ladies, for sharing your personal experiences. It's very valuable.
Yeah, that's really what I was planning to say too, is that how quickly we take the world of ideas and test them within the relevance of our own experiences, and to tell stories and to bring it to what ultimately then becomes helpful. And what you just described as this realization that yes, actually one of our tasks is to overcome the limitations of the generations that preceded us, okay? And when we see that is what our task is, then it becomes maybe less about how angry I am, or although angry might be the emotion that's consistent with the unfairness of something, but we see that as the task of adulthood, to gain the responsibility for ourself as separate and autonomous beings, okay? It goes back to that need. So what I really appreciate is that we can take theories and ideas and a roadmap of how it is that we even think or talk about these things, and we can bring them quite quickly to what does that mean for me now? How is that helpful for me? And that's what my hope has been. I work with individual clients, and I can do that as we go step by step through what that experience is. But I'm really liking the fact that we can do that and bridge the difference between, okay, we're sharing ideas, but we're taking it in a way that is I say relevant, speaks to us, and helpful. Something in this is going to be poignant, and I'm going to be able to use it as part of my growth and the journey I'm on. So, and I agree. I don't know who it is that's ever going to watch this, but there's a chance that it might speak to them, and especially when they hear from each of us what it is that might be personal, you know, and say this isn't just a high-flying ideas. This is also people talking about being alive and sharing their life. Being human in this messy, messy thing called life. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for opening the space. Thank you for being here. Thank you for saying yes. And thank you for you. Thank you for myself. Yeah. You're welcome. That's right. Well, yes, that's the end of our conversation today. And I hope we took some value and reflections and all this stuff that each one of us brought into the table. So that's the second episode of our dialogue at Crossroads. We'll see you next time.